Welcome to Independent Thought and Freedom. My guest today is Brian Manning, a financial analyst and business editor. He's also son of the late Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Patrick Manning, who was a parliamentarian from 1971 until his death from leukemia in 2016. Brian lived his whole life while his father was an active politician, a minister in government in 1971 after a Black Power uprising and army mutiny against the government, the unexpected successor to the leadership of the People's National Movement formed by the international icon Dr. Eric Williams, keeping the country together during an unexpected but failed coup by a small Islamic group in 1990, becoming Prime Minister in 1991, losing in 1995, winning Prime Ministership again in 2001, and then losing it in 2010. Brian Manning has lived largely outside of the limelight, but he has marked a distinctive career path of his own. Brian can give us much insight into what it is like for a young man to grow up in such an environment and how to make one's own mark in the world. His perspective is valuable to us all. Welcome, Brian.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
To say that it was unusual circumstances, to say the least, with I guess, try to minimize the whole thing. A lot of people don't realize how challenging, or maybe some people do actually, how challenging that life could be. It wasn't always all roses. Even as a child, our home was firebombed at one point.
Oh, really? When was that?
Oh, that had to be in the early 80s. Somewhere around there. This was when we lived in Marabella,
Right.
And you always concerned about your security. And, you always have to get snide comments from people sometimes when they disagree with policy, or they just don't like the party. They just don't like your father. They just don't like you. That's how it goes. But you really develop thicker skin. And over time, I learned to forge my own identity and to really step out from my father's shadow, to be the person I wanted to be. And I think that's the biggest challenge of the whole thing, trying to be your own man. I'm sure you can appreciate that. He casts a very big shadow.
Exactly.
So it's difficult. Even when I was abroad, there are people who recognize me, and people would find out, and I just wanted to be me and do my own thing. But sometimes that life always seemed to get in the way.
Yeah, I had interviewed Erica Williams Connell as well, who also talked about all that attention she kept getting, and she hated growing up with the attention.
I never liked it.
Right.
At one point, I told my father I would not go in public with him, ever.
How old were you when you said that?
I think I was early teens, maybe.
Right.
Somewhere around there. But you couldn't go to the mall. You have to go to church. After church is over, we're in the car waiting. He's spending an hour and a half shaking hands with the whole, congregation. So it made things challenging sometimes.
Right. I mean, did you feel pressure growing up, being his son?
Absolutely. You don't want to do anything to really damage your parents' career or to damage the good name that they have given to you. And then there are always parties out there that are interested in tarnishing your name, even if it's with bold-faced lies.
Right.
And sometimes these lies are hard to deal with. It's one thing for people to believe something that is completely untrue. But over time you learn to just shake it off. People are going to believe what they want to believe, regardless of the evidence or facts. After you realize that, you start to ignore it, because you can say what you want. The evidence can be right in front of their faces. They're going to believe what they want to believe.
Do you want to give me an example of maybe one of the more memorable lies that were told against you that you could clear up here?
I know there was one that there was one rumor that my mother and father had separated, and my mother had a room in the Hyatt, and they weren't living together. But the person who told me the rumor, I told them I just left my parents' house. Are together in their room, talk. So you start to ignore nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean...
You don't let it get to you after a while. It's like what?
Yeah. That same lesson that you said there, I read that in Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography. He was talking about, when you get in public life, people say anything and everything, and you basically just have to live your life in such a way that people in the end would say, no, I don't think the person could do that,
Yeah,
or
no,
whatever.
that's true.
Yeah,
Exactly, and it really holds you to a higher standard, in some cases an unreasonable standard.
yeah.
People expect perfection from you, but not from themselves. You know, you have to strike a balance, because if you try to be perfect, it's going to drive you crazy. So you have to accept that you're an imperfect human being, and the only thing that you can do is your best to be your best.
Right.
And that's what I keep in the back of my mind. That when I make mistakes just like everyone else, I have failures just like everyone else. And the only road to success is one paved with failure. You're not going to succeed at anything meaningful if you don't try and fail until you get it right. So,
Absolutely.
sometimes when people are staring, they're looking, you feel like you're in a fishbowl, but you still have to find a way to power through that and to live your life.
Now, as young men, young boys, there's always a sense of rebellion. I mean, did you rebel against your father at any
Absolutely.
point?
Absolutely. I never enjoyed being at the PM residence. I never liked it. I always felt like it was like living in a hotel. It was never a home. And we were young, and I had my own dreams and ambitions, and I wanted to play basketball. I wanted to hang out with my friends. And all of a sudden, that became very complex. It was soon
Right.
after. When he was first in office, it was soon after the coup.
Yeah.
So things weren't as safe as they used to be. The coup really changed the whole environment of Trinidad and Tobago almost overnight.
Yeah.
And just wasn't the same. I couldn't be my own man or have the freedom that I once enjoyed, and it was difficult.
Hmm. What were some of you talked about the dreams and aspirations that may have differed or not being in line with I suppose, being a prime minister's son. Is that right? Am I understanding you correct?
No, well, I mean, I wouldn't say not in line, but it made things more difficult. I always had ambitions of playing sports. I
Okay.
was like music, that kind of thing, and it's difficult to do some of these things when you're constantly surrounded by special branch people.
Right.
After a while, you realize that your best friends are in special branch. And the people that you're closest with, are special branch people. You're like, okay, that can't be healthy.
Well,
So
so
I
you play
enjoy
music?
being abroad. I DJ sometimes. That's what I do in my quiet moments. I like DJing.
Right.
And I've
And
committed myself to learning piano at some point, but I'm working on it. To squeeze that in somewhere.
good, good. But you were saying that that's why you liked being abroad because you didn't have this fishbowl life. Is
Yeah,
that
there was more freedom. There was more freedom, yeah. And at one point, I just avoided Chimbigonians, Caribbean people in general.
hmm
I just wanted to have my privacy and to live my life and to not have the whole world commenting on it or people treating me differently because of who my parents were. So people would
where
ask me, what do your parents do? And I'd say they work for the government.
where were you?
I was at the University of Maryland. I
Okay.
lived in Washington, D.C. for several years. I also lived in Miami.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, but still, there are a lot of Trinis there, kind of
A lot.
Miami.
Trust me, a lot. The treaties are everywhere.
Yes.
You can't avoid that.
Yeah.
Actually, when I was an undergrad, I worked part-time. I gave that story at my father's funeral where he said that I needed a job, right? So I did get a job. I worked in telemarketing and door-to-door sales
hmm
part-time while I was an undergrad. And, used to go door-to-door in Washington, D.C. And, I was just minding my business, doing my work. And I knocked on this door. It was this Trinidad couple. and started writing on the sheet, saying what they wanted. They wanted an estimate on double pane seal vinyl replacement windows, only for easy cleaning, lifetime warranty and guarantee, save you on your energy bills. I know to this day I could say that off the top of my head. So many times. And when I put my name on the form, the lady says, "Wait, no, you're not Mr. Manning's son." In the middle of Washington D.C., like, oh shucks. So things like that happen sometimes,
Right.
regardless
Now,
of how low of a profile you try to keep.
I have read before where you talked about because of your American education, You grew up to be the only capitalist in a home of misguided comrades.
Yes, guys. I mean, I have no problem with socialism, and I think they're a healthy mix. Like I always tell people, I don't agree with socialism for essential services. I don't think that the private sector should be involved in healthcare and education and things that people need to survive. Profit maximization doesn't work in those essential services, in my view.
Mm-hmm.
But in the private sector, it's healthier to have competition and free market forces because you get an equilibrium price without any kind of wastage. And people are motivated to maximize revenue by minimizing cost and increasing efficiency. Government has gotten involved in several industries in which they felt that they had to keep prices lower. And that over time is going to erode the prospects of that business. And we have several state enterprises that just haven't functioned well because the state enterprises are built on a premise of value for money, while the private sector is about profit maximization, minimizing costs, increasing revenue.
Did you have arguments with your father about this at all?
Several times, several times on various issues.
While he was prime minister?
Yes, I mean we used to talk all the time. Like I said, he would come home sometimes and say, "I just left parliamentary debate, and I have to come home to another debate at home." So debate at work and debate at home. So I'm just putting forward my idea. Okay, you don't have to be like that.
Do you think that you influenced your father in any way, policy-wise? Changed his mind?
I believe so. In some cases, I remember the case of the soccer warriors when they came back from Germany, and
right. The football team. For the international listeners, our international football, for the American soccer.
Yeah, soccer. I think I'd be filleted if I said soccer. It's football.
That's right.
Right. So, I said to him that, you should, instead of giving these guys cash, you give them units at UTC and assign them a financial advisor to guide them in how to spend this money that the government is giving them. And if you don't understand the history of lotto winners, many lotto winners are flat broke within a matter of months.
That's right.
Because they have poor habits and money doesn't change that.
That's correct.
People who build wealthy habits, and that's when it becomes sustainable. People who just acquire wealth, whether it's through lottery winnings or inheritance or whatever, tend to misspend because they didn't inherit the discipline and the skills to manage that money effectively. So I felt that,
Yeah. I mean, when your father first came prime minister in 1991, I mean, he ushered in a huge change in economic policy for Trinidad and Tobago. Although the previous government, which was a new government, the NAR, had talked about, changing policy, but it's your father who ironically came from the old party that had governed Trinidad and Tobago for 30 years and oversaw a huge state sector. But when your father took over leadership, it was around the time of the fall of the Soviet Union and all that during 91, 92. And your father changed policies completely, divested, floated the exchange rate, freed up imports, and we used to have these negative lists, and really liberalized the economy, which caused a huge change. And a lot of people can't remember how it was, but were you part of those discussions at all? You would have been young those days.
Yeah, I was young back then. I did speak with him about our diversification project, which was the main reason why I came back to Trinidad and Tobago in the first place. And I saw massive potential for downstream energy projects, the energy intensive projects, such as the aluminum smelter. The aluminum smelter, regardless of some of the criticisms, I believe, would have created thousands of jobs in a part of Trinidad and Tobago that is notorious for high unemployment rates. You have to think about it. Aluminum is one of the most, highly used or high in demand industrial metals. Even now, you have Ford Motor Company and others building vehicles completely out of aluminum. The Ford F-150 has been the highest selling vehicle in the United States for the past 30 years. And now they're building that vehicle completely of aluminum.
Yeah, and
And
I mean, for the listeners that may not know this abroad. I mean, Trinidad and Tobago has became the number one exporter of methanol in the world.
ethanol,
I mean,
and
it's an oil and gas producing country, but methanol number one exporter, ammonia number one exporter,
in the world.
nitrogenous fertilizers a major exporter.
Correct.
Uh, ArcelorMittal Iron and Steel began its global operations from Trinidad. I mean, and it was your father really who ushered in that
Yes.
phase of
Do you know Trinidad and Tobago would
industrial
look like
expansion.
if we did not have gas or didn't have any of these downstream industries? Our economy would have collapsed years ago,
Yes.
decades ago. And I don't think people appreciate that enough. We went from an oil economy to a gas economy.
Yeah.
And if we did not have gas in this place, with oil at $20 a barrel, I mean, we would have been completely sunk as a country.
Exactly. And Atlantic LNG, it was Trinidad and Tobago that kick-started the global trade in LNG in the 1990s. And these were policies, very visionary, pioneering policies of your father.
Venezuela still doesn't have LNG assets. That's why they need us to monetize their Dragon Field, asset for them. But they can't do it themselves. Think about that. They have the largest oil reserves in the world. And little Trinidad and Tobago has an opportunity to really monetize gas assets on behalf of Venezuela.
Yeah, I know it's quite amazing that the potential of this small place and what we have achieved through that.
Yeah, and the main lynch of the diversification, energy intensive policy was we are going to produce here iron, steel, aluminum, and plastics.
Yeah.
Right. If you look around in any room, those four materials are the foundation of modern society. Yeah. If I have access to effectively well-priced aluminum or those commodities, it gives me a chance to be competitive in producing almost any item, any combination or permutation of those items.
I want to ask you, do you know the Guyanese economist Clive Thomas? Do you know him?
No, not familiar.
Because he made this argument in the 1980s that these were the commodities that the West Indies should be producing. Iron, steel, aluminum, plastics, these sorts of things. And in 1968, he and Havelock Brewster, two economists with the New World Group, who I claim a legacy from, they talked about taking the alumina from Jamaica and the energy from Trinidad to make a smelter. So it's been a long, a long dream of many, and we achieved a lot of it, but there's still a lot more to go.
There's too much politics in Trinidad and Tobago, even for sensible, viable projects, and this country is not going to last without a serious diversification policy. There are just people who are trying to undermine everything for personal and political reasons, and that cannot be allowed. Trinidad and Tobago cannot survive going forward in the situation that we are in, especially where oil and gas prices are expected to be depressed going forward. I mean, you have alternative energy, you have electric cars. These are reducing the demand for oil and gas worldwide. The United States is now a net producer of oil and gas. They export oil and gas. The world has changed. And we have to look at these changes coming and know that we have to diversify our sources of income. Or we're not going to be able to last as a country. That should be obvious by now.
And the political division you talk about is really global now. I mean, in the United States, Trump is like a lightning rod, and people will change their position on things whether Trump agrees with it or not. They may have agreed with it last year, but now because Trump agrees with it this year, now they're against it. And politics around the world, including here, has been so divisive.
Yeah, it's senseless. There are a few things that Trump has said that made any economic sense. Mm-hmm. Asking for the same violation of free market forces, which never works. We're trying to get the Chinese can import aluminum and steel from halfway across the world to the United States at a lower price than they can produce it domestically in America. Okay, I want you to think about that for a second. Even if they paid the tariff that was before, it's still cheaper than if they made it in America. And these are inputs. These are final products. It's one thing if you were putting a tariff on final products. He's putting a tariff on inputs, which means American products that were manufactured in the U.S. became more expensive. They became more expensive. They were less in demand. The prices went up. There was, like I said, lower demand, and companies lost profitability and persons lost their jobs. He is undermining the American economy with misguided economic policy, and almost every economist has said makes no sense. But that doesn't stop him from doing it anyways.
But I want to bring it back to the Trinidad politics and you growing up in it, because you may have some interesting stories here for us. Like for example,
too many.
I mean, like some of the political and public events that maybe you may have remembered most vividly growing up, with your father, like the coup, when this Islam, and to explain it to the foreign audience, there was a small Islamic group here of Muslims that were recent converts, and they overthrew the government, a new government that had just come in after 30 years of rule by a previous administration, the PNM, which your father later on led. And that traumatized the country. We had never expected or seen anything. It's the first Islamic and only Islamic coup attempted in the Western Hemisphere. Now, what do you remember about that?
I remember it was during the July-August holidays, and that's one thing I remember because I was that young, like in high school. And my parents made my brother and me, go stay at a friend's house. We didn't stay at our home because we were concerned that somebody could come after us. And our address was well known back then. I mean, my father had the address and phone number in the phone book for years when we were growing up.
Yes.
He used to call the house to ask if it was really him. He's like, yes, this is the right place. Bye. I got the phone. So we had to go stay at a friend's house, and it was difficult because we didn't know what was going to happen next. Nobody knew. The American insurrectionists had in mind, and they had several people that were killed during the event, and it was harrowing.
So you were hiding out somewhere during that process?
Yes, at a friend's house.
Yeah, because this is kind of covered up in Trinidad and Tobago, and I don't think people want to face it so much. But Abu Bakr, who was the leader of the coup, he wanted an interim government, which he called the Government of National Unity, that included your father, that included Bastio Pandey, who was the leader of opposition at the time, and that included some of the expelled ministers of government. And your father disagreed with any such suggestion of forming. Yes, and a lot of people, including people in the government that was being held hostage, agreed to form this government of national unity, and your father stood against that, and I don't think he's been given enough credit for putting his life and principles on the line there, where people were they were ready to give up.
Yeah.
Did your father talk about that at all?
The lives of the persons in the places that were held by insurrectionists were at stake.
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't just give some glib response. But he said that a government that isn't endorsed by the people is no government at all. And he doesn't want to be on the side of these persons who took control of the country by force. Free and even if they call for their own free and fair elections, it's forced and no kind of government at all. And he maintained that he wanted no part of that, even though there were several other persons who apparently jumped at the opportunity, which even to this day seems crazy to me, but that's what happened.
Yeah, that's right. And we don't reflect on that during this coup, a lot of people were ready to give in to the demands of the coup makers, but your father was
people
not one of them.
People signed a pardon.
That's right.
Signed a pardon for the terrorists.
Yes, that's right. And how about during the times when the snap elections were called in 1995 and 2010, and there was a loss of government? What was it feeling like on your side as a young boy looking at that?
I was more concerned about him. You tried a political maneuver and it didn't work. Also, he felt betrayed by some persons within the party. Also, so it was a difficult time. But what I always admired the most in my father is his positive attitude and his never quit personality. And I think people would have quit a long time ago. Most people didn't want to be in charge of a 33-3 party. Right?
Yes.
It's not like there was a long line of people lining up to lead the PLM after that loss. Okay? And then even after that, it became difficult because there were other people who then saw potential in the party and they wanted to wrest control from him. And what's funny, the election when the PLM lost 33-3 was 1986.
Yeah.
In 1987, my father said,
I want to just explain that to the listeners who wouldn't be familiar. After the PNM had been in government from 1956 to 1981, taking the country into independence, there for 30 years, won every election. Then in 1986, there was a landslide against them.
And they won one election unopposed.
Yeah, and they almost every PNM member was wiped out. The leadership was wiped out, and all that was left was your father and two other people who were not, the leader or deputy political leaders or in that portfolio. And your father had to basically step up and take control of this party when everything was falling apart, and it was quite an interesting time politically for that.
Oh yeah. You have to realize he became opposition leader in his 30s and became prime minister in his early 40s.
Yes.
My father used to say to me, when I was your age, I was running a country, I was running a political party at your age, So you have plenty of room for growth. Thank you very much.
How did you feel when you used to say that to you?
How am I supposed to compete with that? So.
Exactly. I mean, really, that kind of pressure has to be hard.
Trust me, it was ridiculous. But he was very young at the time, and there were senior people in the party who, of course, wanted to be in charge, and he had to stand his ground and say, I believe I have the best plan for this party. He had to remove some of the old guys there because they were not politically attractive anymore, and really revamp the entire party. And like I was going to say, in 1987, after the whitewash in 1986, my father said to me that we are going to win the next election. Like with total conviction. There was no doubt in his mind that the PNM would win in 1991. And the PNM did. He called it as early as a year after that catastrophic loss.
And what he did was quite impressive because, as you say, I mean, he was in his 30s. And what he did is he took that 30-year-old party, that was, older than him, and he removed everybody. He brought in a whole bunch of new faces.
All the old guys. And of course, they didn't go quietly, right? They went kicking and screaming. They tried to undermine everything. They had to undermine him. He had to wrench them out of there. It wasn't easy at all. And he said one time he was in Parliament, and they lined up. They were speaking on some matter. And the government at the time lined up all 33 speakers to respond to what the opposition was saying. So after he finished speaking, he said all 33 people stood up one by one and started to just tear into him and the PNM. He said that day he sweat through his tie. He said the shirt was wet. His shirt was wet. His tie was wet with sweat. He said he takes so much licks. He just wanted to go home and never leave the house again. But it was hours of being beaten, But that's the kind of I would say the kind of molding that builds strong character and builds a man and builds the man that he became. So.
Yeah, I mean, what were some of the positive political times you remember? Publicly. What were some of the most positive memories that you had?
I think Shogun. That was some people disagreed with the expenditure. I think
that's the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting that was held in 2009. Right?
Yes. I mean, around that time too, oil and gas, I think oil was over $100 a barrel. I mean, there was money flowing through this country. Our debt to GDP ratio was around 14%. I mean, and these
We were among
projects
the
were happening.
fastest growing economies in the world at that time.
Yeah, I was excited about the prospects of Trinidad and Tobago. You know, I really came back to see, you know, how can I get involved? I want to be involved. I want to be involved in the IFC. I want to be involved in energy intensive industries. I want to be involved in making Tamana Park the Silicon Valley of the region. I mean, these are exciting projects and it's your home country. And, you know, the most painful thing is that all of these projects fell flat. It's one thing if you disagree with the projects, but you have to replace them with something. And no one has since then. And the country has really struggled economically since. We have diversified through projects where we had competitive advantage. And too many of the ideas that we have heard just don't make any sense to me at all. You know, and they haven't even started, even been able to be implemented. So where are we going?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true. I mean, after the Point Lisas infrastructure, like the build in 1992, I mean, in terms of the revamping that made us, you know, number one exporters in the world, we haven't had anything major since.
Other than the Hyatt Hotel, really, and what else? What other diversity? I mean, Hyatt Hotel has made Trinidad and Tobago the business conference capital of the region. There's not another Caribbean island that can host business conferences of the scale of Trinidad and Tobago. And that's all because of the Hyatt Hotel. That gives us competitive advantage. And we have seen profitability from that project. So why can't we do this in other areas? Why can't we have a marina, shipbuilding? Why can't we have, you know, a port for repairs to attract tourists, to attract other persons? And what irks me the most are the very people who complain about every project. If you cut a blade of grass, it's some sort of environmental disaster. You know, are the same ones who complain when they go to the bank and can't take out any US. That's because we don't have any. That's why you can't take out any US. So we haven't earned any. Oil and gas revenues are depressed, severely depressed. You can't get what we don't have. All right, so stop fighting everything.
Right. I mean, yeah, you do champion the industrialization program and diversification of Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, do you see this as a continuation of your father's legacy? Do you put it in that context?
I would say yes, that is me trying to carry on what he had started because it just makes perfect economic sense. Okay, focusing on tourism is nice, but tourism can't be our main driver. Our CARICOM neighbors have focused on tourism for decades, and they are some of the most indebted countries in the hemisphere. Tourism is nice. We can't depend on it. We can't depend on agriculture either. Our CARICOM neighbors have proven those two things. Right? We are blessed with energy assets in oil and gas, and we need to use those competitive advantages. We are blessed with our geographic location, that we are outside the hurricane belt, so we are good for yachts, we are good for marinas, we're good for nautical businesses. We have to use advantages, or very soon, people are not going to have jobs or forex in this country.
What's your view on climate change and these issues in terms of oil and gas economy needing to be phased out? What is your view?
A lot of the technology has become cleaner. I mean, that's the reason why Trump pulled out of the Paris Accord and the Kyoto also agreement, because he knows that if they agree to climate change, and it's all political, that they would have to spend money to refurbish their plants to make them cleaner. And that would, of course, add a huge cost to many of the industrialists in the United States. The only reason they're denying climate change is to protect American business. You know, and in the grand scheme of things, Trinidad and Tobago may have high pollution per capita, but compared relative to the rest of the world, it is minuscule, to what's being done in some of the larger developed countries. We need these projects. We need these jobs. We need to have them for our country and our children to have a future here, or we are going to be, end up in a very situation.
What lessons would you say you learned from your father? What would you say maybe the single most important lesson?
I would say his positivity. I mean, I've seen him take some catastrophic blows. And I remember when he found out he had a tumor in his kidney. He just called me over one night. I was living in my place. I came into the house. He said, "Brian, I had a regular checkup. They discovered a tumor in my kidney. I'll be going to Cuba in a few days and have an operation to have the kidney removed." So don't worry about a thing and say some prayers. Take care. And that was the whole conversation. I was like, what? What did you just say? You know, I'm just like, what? He's like, yep, you just have operation and remove the kidney. And it should be okay. On it early. All right, bye. You know, he was just that positive of a person. He just felt.
And you know what, that reminds me of something I heard you say before in another interview, that you did some years ago, which is that your father had told you once that a leader cannot lose his head. Everybody else would be losing their heads around you, but a leader cannot.
Cannot. Yeah. People take direction from you. You know, and even during some of the most challenging times, his ability to maintain his cool is what, I mean, I'm still working on that, because he just had an uncanny ability to stay calm in any situation. And
give me an example that really stands out to you.
I mean, I think that was a big one, his health issues. I mean, at one time he had half of his heart, several of his ventricles, I'm not sure, his heart had to be replaced. Like almost half his heart was mechanical, was plastic. He was calm as ever, going for an operation that, you know, he had, I think it was rheumatoid fever as a child. They weakened his heart valves, so they were leaking. And he had to have an operation to replace parts of his heart with a mechanical plastic heart. And he had to take warfarin and blood thinners, you know, every day after that. And it just never seemed to bother him. He just never seemed like, you know, like this is such a terrible situation, and, you know, I don't know if I can recover from this. Even when he was diagnosed with leukemia, he thought he would beat it. Even when he had a stroke, he thought he was coming back from it. Yeah. You know, he just never gave up.
Well, you know,
Terminator.
Yeah, I was going to say that, you know, but I thought it wouldn't be a good analogy.
Are you a machine?
You know, we've talked about your father a lot, but tell me, what is Brian Manning all about?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a student of economics and finance. I really like picking stocks. I like, you know, doing positive things in terms of diversification, economic growth of Trinidad and Tobago. Those kinds of roles I really enjoy. And I still have plans of completing a PhD and managing my own fund one day. So, you know, I'm just working towards it, getting the experience that I need, getting the qualifications that I need, and just doing what I can.
That's great. I mean, you know, congratulations on your appointment as editor of the Business Guardian.
Yes.
Do you have? Would you say you have like a main message that you want to put out in the world, given your role?
Diversification. I from day one, right? I came in before the last budget, and I said the number one issue is the debt load that we have incurred in the past few years. I think in 2009, our debt to GDP ratio was about 14%. Today, it's hovering around 60%, less than a decade later. And also, it doesn't include certain liabilities that government has incurred. Also, all of those, many of those, will also have to be paid. And the main solution for this debt issue that we have is diversification. We have to generate additional revenues. You can only cut so much until you hit bone, right? The government is trying to slash its expenses. It's trying to raise revenue through taxation. How much can you tax the population, and how much of our expenses can be cut before you make the quality of life in this country unbearable for the majority of its citizens? Well, the one solution is generating additional revenues through diversification. Over and over.
What's fascinating I'm picking this up because of the local context here, and some listeners abroad might not be aware, but the government that is in power is the party that your father led, and you're critical of their policies right now. Why didn't you get involved in politics? That's interesting, because your grandfather was, and then your father, but why not you?
I'm critical of any government that does not have a stable diversification plan, because we need it. It's necessary.
Sorry, I missed you there. Could you say it? Could you repeat that?
I said I'm critical of any government that does not have a serious diversification plan, because at this point it's essential. We need it for this country to survive. The politics part was difficult. You know, the one person who had difficulty benefiting from my father's role is us. My mother was already involved. It would seem strange, and we had arguments about it. For him to be appointing me to senior positions, even though I was well qualified, and the uproar and the blowback some of those appointments may have been too much.
Right.
He felt, and I was biting to contribute, so I did a lot of things behind the scene.
Right.
But to say a formal appointment or role, I mean, if my father decided to make me a minister, I can only imagine what the retaliation would have been.
Correct.
There probably would have been a moment's peace. So I contributed where I could.
Right. Right. That makes sense.
And if this current government or any government asked me to do something that I believe is in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, I would make myself available to do it.
Right. So it's not that politics left a bad taste in your mouth or anything, but the circumstances of allegations of nepotism and these sorts of things were really sort of what made you take a back seat.
I mean, he helped so many people, appointed them to positions, helped them with challenges in navigating the public service, but it was always difficult for him to help me.
Right, yeah.
Because there's always somebody there to scream nepotism, I think I'm a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago too.
Right.
I'm allowed to contribute. I don't have to be on a shelf somewhere. I'm a qualified, eager person who's passionate about developing Trinidad and Tobago. Why should I not be involved in doing so?
These are difficult questions, especially in a small society and in a small economy like Trinidad and Tobago, where there aren't a lot of opportunities around. Yeah.
What does the government not manage at this point? I mean, now they manage the two largest banks in the country, the UTC, most of the industrial estates. The government manages everything. As much as we like to say we're a free market economy, the government manages most of this economy.
Correct.
Period.
And the private sectors are contractors of the government.
Correct. So if you have a close relationship with the Prime Minister, where are you supposed to not? You go where you are not accused of nepotism.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I think you had written that, and that we say that we have a private sector class in this country, but it's really a contractor class. Correct.
Where's the research and development? You show me a research R&D department in any of the major conglomerates. Why aren't they getting more involved in agriculture or in some of these other diversification projects? They don't want to take too much risk. They're not risk takers. They're not entrepreneurs in the real sense. They want contracts. They want government to buy ads in the media. They want government to pay them for supplying goods and services. But take an entrepreneurial risk. I mean, CL Financial is probably the only group that was actually taking huge risks. And we all know how that went.
Exactly.
So others would be a little concerned about doing that themselves.
Yeah, because they crashed in 2008 after a huge expansion in energy, banking, all sorts of things. Yeah. Now, reflecting back on where you've reached so far, I mean, if you had to do everything over, is there anything you would change?
I think I would have worked on Wall Street for a while.
Okay.
It's quite difficult to get into a Wall Street position, but I think that experience would have been invaluable. And I think that's one thing I would have done. And I think I would have also insisted on having a much larger role in developing Trinidad and Tobago, in spite of the criticism. Some days you just don't want to deal with it. People have your name in the newspaper for nonsense, for bold-faced lies, and you can't say as a human being that doesn't affect you. It does.
Yeah.
And I don't care who you are. Nobody want to wake up every day to see their name being spoken in the media or written in anger every single day.
Exactly.
I saw someone call the Prime Minister a done position he had. I said, okay, I agree with his position, but I wouldn't call him man a dunce.
Yeah. The personal name calling
that's the kind of rhetoric, unfortunately, that's become part and parcel of our local politics, and it's tiring because it gets us nowhere.
And would you say you have enemies? I mean, are there people who are opposed to what you're doing at all?
Oh, definitely. That's the tough part. There are always going to be enemies. There are people, people start to attack you. and you wonder why, and you realize that it has nothing to do with you. You know, they're opposed to the project, they're opposed to the party, they're opposed to your last name, they're opposed that your daddy is somebody, they're opposed that you actually educated yourself and became someone. You know, people have their own personal issues, and sometimes they try to take it out on you. And you
Right.
know, you early on, you know, as a youngster, I would shy away from that kind of thing, and you know, it'd be hurtful. But you know, you mature, you get stronger, and you just start setting your boundaries and telling people where to get off when they just taking too many liberties with your personal space. You know.
In terms of your goals moving forward that you said, I mean, do you have sort of any major fears or trepidations about any particular challenges that you may have to overcome?
No, I mean, any kind of reward comes with risk, you know,
Yeah.
and I'd much rather try and fail than live a life I've never tried, you know. So I just plan purposefully and keep moving forward. That's what I do.
Yeah.
You know, I think I inherited that from my father, and you can't let yourself be bogged down by failure. I mean, he failed many times, but he's still the longest serving MP in history of CARICOM. You know, and he was prime minister on multiple occasions, but none of that came without any sort of adversity. There was a lot of adversity. You know, there were times where people tried to do things to our family that you wouldn't even imagine. I mean, a certain bank tried to call in his bank loans in the run up to a general election because if you declared bankruptcy, you couldn't contest a seat.
Right.
You know? So you know, you would be surprised at some of the dirty tricks people have tried to really do to us as a family over the years. But it has only made us closer as a family. I mean, my mother and my brother are the closest people to me. And, you know, we learned early on that all we have is us and we trust each other. And we have to stand up for each other.
Yeah, I mean, the closeness and strength of your family is apparent for people to observe from the outside. I mean, and anybody could see that, you know, and it's something I think everybody admires, you know, and I must congratulate you all on that. And I suppose, I mean, there's a question I normally ask people, but I think the answer is obvious. I would normally ask them, you know, what's the most important thing that would, you know, make you overcome your fears or doubts or your enemies in going forward? And it's obviously the inspiration of your father, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? We don't
Yeah.
always get along, but we know that when things become challenging, that we are there for each other.
Well, that's good. Finally, in closing up, what would you recommend to a young person listening to this podcast, trying to make his way in the world now?
I would say, one, educate yourself in something meaningful, something that has potential, something that you can contribute and be happy doing. Um, you know, there's a lot that needs to be done in Trinidad and Tobago, and there are lots of people who have become frustrated by a system that they believe, you know, really doesn't want change. And Trinidad and Tobago may be one of the most change-resistant places I have ever encountered. And, but you know, at some point, I tell people we're gonna have to experience some pain in this place for there to be some kind of meaningful change. And I think that day is coming. It's not far off. So young people who want to really make a difference in this place, I would say hold on and stay the course because their time is coming. We cannot continue on the path that we are on, and it's you know, we have to see some serious change in the way we do things. We can't just have rabble rousers undermining every attempt at every project because they don't like the government or don't like the person or whatever ridiculous reason. The entire country can suffer because of a handful of people trying to destroy everything and hurt everyone else in the process. That can't last.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for sharing your experience and providing a good example to the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. I think you really have. You know, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you. Well, that's all for Independent Thought and Freedom this week. Please join us again next week. And in the meanwhile, make sure you subscribe, leave me a rating, like, and share this podcast with your friends. Thanks, and bye for now.